Danielle Berger, and I'm just going to quickly walk through you Michael Bonasaras, and Michael Lundstrom's project for LSF 504, and our project was on the effects of race on leadership. So, just to introduce a couple of topics and a couple of questions that will be addressed, is race really a construct that personalities derive from, and can we look at race as a category of culture? So to start off with, we're going to go through how race can be both beneficial and be detrimental. And before we do that, we have some definitions. Feel free to read through them, pause my audio, because they may be necessary to understand the project. Just a couple of statistics to start out and set the mood. So, looking at Fortune 500 companies, which are essentially the largest companies in the country, there have only ever been 15 Black executives that have made it to CEO, or the person in charge. There are currently 3 acting CEOs with African American descent. That makes up less than 1% of all of the Fortune 500 leaders. And there are currently no Black majority-owned companies in the Fortune 500 rankings. That being said, let's go on. So, according to a study conducted at George Mason University, they found no evidence that supports the idea that leaders of color are looked at unfavorably when compared to white leaders. They received no significant differences between evaluations for Black and white leaders. But Keith A. Caver and Stella B. Livers found leaders of color to be more alienated leaders than their white counterparts. They said that the executive team saw me not as a seasoned strategist, me being minority leaders, but as an authority on race relations. They said when an African American man was hired, they promoted within a company, he was stereotyped and rumors spread that he was creating his own ghetto fiefdom. But of course, we know both this and the previous slide are not 100% true, and it can be situational. Next, we have the effect race plays on a leader's ability to lead. Sonia Ospina and Erica Foldley claim there isn't much of an effect. They studied many racial groups and found that these groups were able to turn mechanisms of oppression into effective vehicles for constructive change. They said by being aware of how their subordinates viewed them, leaders could use these perceptions to their advantage and draw strength from them. But a different study at New York University found that race often limits the effectiveness as leaders because of the belief in white privilege. Unfortunately for these leaders, developments in their field of leadership, the review suggests that scholarly work on race and leadership remains separate from the mainstream leadership traditions, which renders Western perspectives and whiteness the default categories to measure leadership. And both of these things rely on cultural values. So that brings us back to our 2 initial questions. Is race really a construct that personalities derive from? And can we look at race as a category of culture? For the first question, obviously not. We know that personalities develop from a person's environment, upbringing, and other life experiences. So it is illogical there are not more minority leaders. Of course, it's only logical when looking at race in a vacuum, because we also determined race is a category of culture, meaning it is through our culture that a meaning of what race is and the societal impacts a person experiences are determined. This being said, race does not mean the same thing to every person, nor is it the same across cultures. The example being that in Brazil, race is determined by phenotype, or how we look, but in the United States, it is based on our ancestry. So we can see culture playing an effect. Ultimately, we decided that race plays an effect on our leaders and is often negative. But it is illogical. And these are our sources.